The format's a little bit different today. Not only are we missing O'Grady, um, he's fighting a totally different battle right now, which I'm sure will come out successful. Um, but we're, we're adapting and we're using different software today. So hopefully this is actually coming out over the interwebs. Oh, I see it now. Cool. So hopefully you guys can see us. So ready, set, data. A much shorter introduction. We have Lee Markham. What do I point over here? Database
Right.
administrator. I don't even know anymore. Let's try this. I'll go this way. Database administrator. I'm Anthony Forner, data engineer, and here we go. I need to mute the tab. 1 second. The guy who handles all this is not here today, so we'll figure it out. Speaking of forgetting to mute the tab and getting lost of new software, it's mistakes we all make, right? So that's what
Yeah.
I thought we'd talk about today. I felt inspired. I wanted to chat about the fact that, like, especially in IT, we tend to be very IT centric. We make mistakes sometimes, right? No matter what, it's going to happen. No one doesn't make mistakes, and I thought it'd be an interesting topic to cover. I would maybe that's really why O'Grady's not here. He felt embarrassed. He had no mistakes to share, nothing to bring up. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe that's really what's going on. But how's your day going? Make
Um,
any mistakes today?
I did right before the stream. I somehow muted the tab that we are using to stream from, and made you think that your audio wasn't working. So that was interesting. Um, yeah, like that. See.
Exactly.
um, so I mean, I guess the day was okay. It was pretty busy, just like it always is. There's just lots of things going on. Um, Lots of people needing things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of
Feels good to be needed.
it does feel good to be needed. Sometimes I'd like to be less needed, but yes, I understand the sentiment you expressed there. So I mean, I guess I can't complain. First world problems, right? I mean,
Yeah. I always say when I have a busy day, you know what? I'm now bored. I've been saying that forever. I've had jobs that bored me, and it's good to have stuff to do. Cool. Yeah, I had a pretty busy day today. The usual issues of I have this bad habit of going to work and being like, I'm going to take care of A and B. Like I'll have a thing or two that, like, I'm going to tackle, and that's not where the
right?
day goes, right? So it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have this great plan of all the things that you want to get done, and the universe has a different plan for you that day. And you get to the end of the day, and the things on your list didn't even get touched. But you know you worked really hard.
Yes, and sometimes even though you're working really hard, you make a mistake.
That's
So
true.
yeah, um, I know somebody who used to tell stories about. Um, he was a manager at one point, and he said that I won't get on you for making a mistake because at insert job here, I don't think I should share the exact details. I took down all the servers on a certain coastline for the place he worked for. Right, like they lost half the country.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like it's going to happen, right? Um, I kind of think it'd be great if companies actually like rewarded you for your first mistake. I don't know if that's something that anyone would buy into.
Just let's just get it out of the way and make you feel comfortable. We'll give you a
Oh yeah,
reward.
well, like, yeah, I'm thinking about like interns and new people. Like, I was going to talk about that. Like, there's some famous ones. Well, I don't know about famous, but some stuff that outside the company people hear about and people find out as an intern. But yeah, like I feel like the first time you make a big mistake on production, it shows that you are actually doing work, right? If if you never if you never have the opportunity to make a mistake, then you probably aren't touching anything important, right? So at some point, you go
Yeah.
past the level of just writing documentation, and you get to the point where you're doing real work, and then there's the
Sure.
opportunity to make a mistake. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. It, if I meet people that tell me they've never made a mistake, then I have to wonder, how long have you been doing your job, and B, how often do you lie? Um, One of those two things is a concern to me. So yeah, I mean, I agree. It shows that you're in the game. You're putting in effort to actually produce or try to produce something
mhm.
versus just watching everybody else do their quiet quitting. See how I worked that in.
Ah, good
Um,
show.
yeah. So hey, Liam.
Heyo. So yeah, yeah, so you like I was saying, there's a progression then. Oh yeah, so chat's asking, Novus is asking, no O'Grady today. Yeah, O'Grady is not able to join us today, so we adapted and we got a different service running. I think, am I pointing in the right direction?
Hmm.
Can't even see it.
You are.
But,
That's where I am. No, the other
no,
way.
Streamyard.
Oh, I believe yes, that's correct. StreamYard. I thought you were trying to
Okay,
point to me.
it's oh, it's so the other way we do it, well, our faces look a certain way, it like adjusts. And so it's like a mirror because it knows that some people get bothered by seeing non-reflections, and so
Right.
this is a reflection, and it's like really throwing me off. So pointing's hard. So if I think about it, I think I'm supposed to point that way for StreamYard. Ah, I did it the first try. Cool.
There you
Okay.
go.
Anyway, so speaking of making mistakes, I feel like there's a progression. Like as you go through your career, at first you're protected. Everyone tells you just to work on documentation, or I mean, every company's different, or work on dev, and then you
Right.
start touching more and more important things, and then it opens up an opportunity to touch something that's important and possibly make a mistake. But it's going to happen, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Um, I was I had to look it up to make sure I had it right, but there was a Amber Alert that went out not that long ago. I feel like it was within the last year. It feels recent, but see if I can find it. There it goes. So Amber Alert came out and it said emergency alert, Gotham City, Missouri, purple green 1978 Dodge, 3700 GT, Missouri. You kid me? And then the link, Missouri alerts. So
I
here in
remember this
Missouri,
now.
yeah, yeah. So in Missouri, and then people read that like purple and green. Wait, what? And then the license plate says, "You kid me? It's Joker, right?" So
Hmm.
that was actually like a test or a debug, something they were supposed to do that was stays internal.
Yeah.
And then you want to hear a new guy flipped a switch or something. I don't know. And it went out. Mistakes happen, right?
Yeah.
Um, there was another one. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't do it fast enough. There was um, I really wish it's one of the big companies that everybody knows, and a maybe chat knows. Chat, let us know if you remember this. Um, an email went out to everybody about their account, and it was just a little test email, testing. Like we do in IT. Like we'll send a little,
Hmm.
make sure it's working. I'll
Yeah.
email myself, or I'll send something, but usually it's on dev. Usually
Yeah.
it's to yourself or to a group that you're comfortable with doing. And it
Yeah.
went out and like nationwide, everyone got it.
Oopsie.
I really wish I could remember what it was. I feel like it was one of the streaming giants, Netflix or
I think
Hulu or something.
I feel like it was somebody at AWS.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, I was thinking not that big.
this seems more and more familiar, like it's coming to me, and it feels like it's AWS, but I could be wrong about that. Um, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I'm holding a story for you. So whenever we're ready for a
Oh,
story.
you go for it. You go for it. I
Okay.
can't find. Let's try it again. I mean, I can't quite think of what to Google to find that out.
Yeah. So one of the things that I remember very early on, a mistake I made, and it wasn't that big, but for me, it was like it was a big deal. So I have SQL Server Management Studio open, and I'm drilled into a database. This is production, and I'm
I'm already
scrolling.
terrified.
Yeah, this was a while ago. Um, so I'm scrolling through the tables. I'm trying to find something, and somehow, I guess through the action of scrolling with the mouse, I clicked into a table name and deleted the table name. I didn't delete or drop the table, but if the table is dbo.mytable, now it's dbo dot blah, 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 because
Hmm.
I've somehow, with the keyboard and the mouse, I've gotten rid of the table name. And boy, I remember it because I went, I completely freaked. I
Yes.
was like, oh my God, I just broke prod. And then I was like, wait a minute. If I can remember what the table name is, I can fix it. Which luckily I did. Like I knew kind of where in the list I was. So I knew what table I had changed. And so I just put the name back in there, frantically typing, and clicked off of it. Voila, table's back with the correct name. But for a moment, I was like, I have broken our system. That's not good. Uh, and this is a system that, I mean, we were using it for monitoring important things. That's all the details I'll
Yeah.
provide.
Right. Well, no matter where you work, you're monitoring important things. But
Yes, but this was like really important. Anyway,
yeah, yeah. No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah. Well, so all right. So my first question is, if you don't mind me playing 20 questions,
sure.
did anyone notice? Like, was it down enough that people noticed?
No
So this was
one,
a, oh,
it was one of those. I fixed it so fast that nobody else knew. I mean, there's a possibility that there were some failed queries, but
but they refreshed the page a minute later and everything's fine.
I mean, I guess because nothing broke, nobody went, "Hey, why didn't this work?" So
So
it
some
turned
quick
out to be
thinking,
okay.
quick thinking on your part. If you in that situation, so here's a bullet point for anyone taking notes. Hopefully, no one's working that hard. Um, Here's a bullet point: try not to panic. Right, just like
Yeah,
any emergency situation, like try to think logically. And you did. You probably had your moment of panic, like we all would. You gasp, and then you realize, oh, actually, although this is bad, I can fix it. Right.
yeah, yeah. I had a freak out moment, and then I had an aha moment where I realized, no, wait a minute, I'm super familiar with the table names. If I just look at this for a few seconds, I can probably figure out what table I changed. And yeah, it was a quick fix. Luckily, that time my mistake was a quick fix.
Yeah. I had a similar close call. Um, so you'll know this well, but for the audience, and it's not a tool that we use all the time called SSMS. Um, there's options, and this is the same tool he was probably using. There's options to look at tables, look at views, sort procedures, 10,000 other things you can do. Well, one of the things that I like to do on Dev is there's a designer. Where you can drop tables in and like connect them with foreign keys, and you can look at the tables. It makes like a little ER diagram. I love to do that when I'm trying to figure something out, think about something, see how tables are connected. Right. It's also kind of a shortcut if you got a lot of foreign keys. Yes, you should look at the code. You should understand how that works. But sometimes it's just easier to bring in 5 or 6 tables and like let it draw the lines for you. There's a reason you should use it on dev and not prod. And I really wish this wasn't a problem because it would be awesome if we could use it on prod. Any changes you make to the diagram can be made to the database. So if they type in a column or you move something around, or you click here, or you get rid of you're experimenting with those foreign keys or whatever. Um, you could literally make changes. You could think you're developing something on dev. You could be trying to make a change. So of
Yeah.
course, if you're trying to make the change, you can save and make it a dev. So all right, so explanation over. You know what I'm talking about, and honestly,
Mhm.
Lee, you might know where I'm going with this. A manager walked up to my desk and was like, "I need to know this, I need to know that," and I'm trying to explain it. And then I thought I was being smart. I thought I'll be like, "Oh, I'll open up in Designer." So I opened up the wrong SSMS.
Mhm.
I opened up a Designer because I was just working in this database on dev, but again, I opened the wrong one. And so I opened the diagram and I started showing them stuff. And like I'm like, oh, this is how it's all connected. This is what's going on. And then I don't remember what thing I changed or did by accident, but I did it, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then the panic, like you said, the panic set in. This is prod, and I'm like
Oops.
Indiana Jones with the little icon, whatever the thing is, the powder. I'm like trying to like,
Oh yeah.
do I put it back? Can I cancel for sure? And I'm like, I didn't save. And I'm like, is it better just to kill us as a mess at this point? I don't even know if that's true. So I click the X. It goes, oh yeah, you want to save this, right? No, please don't. But yeah,
Do not
terrified.
save my
Like
changes.
no, and it wasn't non-important tables either. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so easy. Like when eventually you touch important stuff so often that you might get a little too comfortable, right? But don't panic, even though we both told stories that involved us panicking, because you will a little bit. There'll be a little bit of shock when it happens, right? But when you try to go and figure out what the next step is, try not to be a panic state.
Right. Yeah. So don't panic. That's the first thing. Um, so this brings me to an idea about um, a little bit about emotional intelligence. I'm wondering if this is even relevant, but I'm going to run with it for just a minute, and then you can
Do
stop
it,
me if you want.
do it.
I thought about this because of the connection to to panic and emotion and how people uh, can uh, be ruled by their emotions. You know those folks who struggle with they get really excited or they get really upset or whatever adjective you want to throw in there.
I feel
And
called
then
out.
that's what they are for a while or they just
Yeah,
don't know how to like respond to things very well. And we all make those mistakes from a social perspective at various times. Um, I'm just wondering if there's any kind of correlation between people who have high emotional intelligence and people who respond to mistakes well.
huh? I don't know. There might be a Venn diagram there. Um, I'm no psychiatrist, psychological smart person. I don't know what the right words are there. There's so many different psych jobs. Psychometrician. That's a relatively new one in my vocabulary.
There you go.
Anyway, so I feel like breaking that down. So okay, if you have a high emotional intelligence, it doesn't mean you're necessarily. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm stating this. Feel free to tell me if I think I'm on base. It's not that you have like more control over emotions, but like you understand that you're able to understand that you're having the emotion and maybe take action. And that could be for some people calming down. That's not always the option. Sometimes it's like, okay, I know I can handle this situation. I need to get out. You know what you need, right? Is that pretty close?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, I do think to a certain degree that it does result in a level of control over your emotion that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have. Like one of the examples I think of from a book I read on emotional intelligence is a person who was swimming in the ocean and they were hit attacked by a shark, and the author goes through the various emotional pieces of that and how obviously it's a traumatic experience at first, but then this person has to think, okay, I can't if I panic I'm dead. I have to think of rationally about this situation. Uh, how far from the shore am I? Can I swim in? Is there someone near me who can help? So you reel in all of that stuff and ask yourself these kinds of questions in order to dig yourself out of the hole you're in. Um,
So yeah, that sounds very similar to what you do in a crisis.
yeah,
Which we're talking about mistakes in IT, so maybe in a way we're talking
it
about
might be a
crisis, right?
crisis.
It might be right, or even if it's a personal one. Like in both our examples, we're the only ones that knew there was a problem. Um,
Yeah,
I have a story queued up that's thing that only the two of us knew was a problem. Also, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That, like, I don't know so if that's emotional intelligence or not, but like that, all those things you listed, those skills
hmm
are important in a crisis or if you just made a mistake. Because I mentioned somebody who took down like half of a network for a large organization, a large also handling very important things when you make
yes,
such organization, um, and also like sometimes these will be a crisis, so to speak. Like you're like, oh, you might, if you make the wrong decision, you might die. And I was ready to be like, or in the situation of what we're talking about, you might get fired, right? Or we talked about imposter syndrome, but too bad O'Grady's not here. He really enjoys it when we get on that topic.
yeah,
Um, imposter syndrome. If you already have imposter syndrome, when this happens, you're like, now everyone's gonna know. Everyone's gonna know. I have no idea what I'm doing.
great.
Uh,
I screwed up, so everyone knows what a
you're
failure I
like,
am.
what? Honestly, I'm relieved now. They're just gonna fire me, and I'm like, I go back to flipping pancakes, right? So
Right.
that's a bad time for imposter syndrome. But if the point you're making, if you can be aware that you're panicking and you're saying it's like this is not important right now. What's important is fixing the problem. Then
Right.
you can get back to it, right? And sometimes mistakes don't cause problems. I don't know if that's
True.
a transition or not. Like my situation could have. It was definitely a big mistake. It was on prod. Um, I needed to be careful with having more than one SSMS open. It does no good to have one on dev and one on prod if I'm going to alt tab as soon as a manager walks by and asks me a question, right? Um,
Yeah.
but like even then, like you have to be aware of your emotions and be like, okay, I did a thing. Is there anything to check on? But yeah, I like what you said. Being aware of your emotions is important in a crisis, and even if it's a non-crisis mistake, you need to be aware of how you handle things. If
Sure.
you need to walk away, if you need to take a second, you know, sometimes you just center yourself. I found myself in situations that were outages or mistakes where, there's some story out there about when you're in an important situation, you should stop and set your watch. I don't know if you ever heard that. I don't remember who.
Okay.
If I make up, who it was, I'll probably be wrong. I'm on the internet, so I don't. But it was somebody, and they said, sometimes they'd be in a crisis situation, and then they'd stop and set their watch. Because if you can't calm yourself enough to set the watch, then you're not calm enough to do the life or death situation. Now,
That makes some sense.
no one's dying if I make a mistake at work, right? I might have to find a resume if I make a bad mistake at work, but no one's dying. But there's people in IT who have very important jobs, right? Whose job impacts very important processes or whatever.
Yeah, think like hospitals, for example. Hospital IT.
Hospitals, security. Not all security is flashlight cops. Sometimes it has a lot to do with safety. Military. I mean, I don't know what
Yeah.
kind of AI is controlling missiles right now, but I look forward to this kind of taking over. I mean, I didn't say that, did I?
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay. Emotional intelligence. All right, story time. I think if I remember the timeline well, one of our first conversations was um, me missing a where clause on an not super important but important enough table that I was sure I was fired. Do you remember this?
Uh,
It has to be early on because I was still very new at the company we both worked at.
I mean, Vaguely.
You're like, Anthony, you made so many mistakes.
No.
Was it a Tuesday or Thursday? I might narrow it down.
Yeah, I don't. I have a vague recollection of that. Obviously, you have a better recollection because it was your mistake, and
Because
you
I
were.
was in a panic state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was hoping that I could fix it. Um, one before anyone noticed, before T started streaming in, that kind of thing. And then I was hoping that I could do it fast enough that I could fix it before telling my boss. Don't know if that's the right call in all situations. In this situation, I really think, okay, if I just had the data, I could do, some kind of super elite join and get the data over. And I'm like, this is in the early days, so I didn't realize that what my first question was impossible. Hey, could you just get me this table? And you're like, no, Anthony, that's not how this works. I gotta restore the whole database. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I wasn't so green that I knew that was gonna be a quick thing. Luckily, it was quicker than I thought. But I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And that's what you did. You managed to get the database up, and then I can do my super whiz bang join. I would put everything back together because I didn't want to nuke the table and copy it over. So I want to do as close to right as possible without losing new data. And then I fixed it, and then to my boss, he didn't fire me. Anyway, so yeah, that was actually I remember it clear as day because that was like very early on, and like I don't know if we had other conversations or not because I didn't know you well enough to be like, hey Lee, I screwed up. I was like, at that time it was me going, I'm gonna have to reach out to DBA and tell my up the table, So yeah, I remember it clearly. But yeah, so once I got over the sweating and the heart palpitations, I figured out that I could fix it. It was fixable.
Yeah.
The table was online. It's just if someone looked up old data, they would have got the wrong information.
Yeah.
And so I did manage. This wasn't my first mistake. I did manage to realize what needed to be done and who I needed to talk to. So thank goodness we had a DBA. Not every company has that, right?
Yay, DBAs.
Yay.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great story, and being new certainly makes it a little more traumatic, because you don't have that what I call work capital with your peers yet, where
It's a good word. I like that. It's a good phrase.
they trust and know you. You're proven. You've done great things for them personally, for the company at large, and it makes it easier to stomach a mistake. When you're new, you don't have that, so it's a little creates a little more panic for sure. Hey Novus, thanks for sharing the story. Um, Mistake I haven't seen, but personally made was broke the ignition key to a multi-million-dollar robotic press brake.
Oh,
Oops,
man.
that's a big oops. But we small, big. Everybody makes mistakes. It's how you handle it, how you deal with it, and I mean, I suppose we're probably going to get to this, but part of what we talked about was, let's say you make a mistake that does impact someone else, either one or two people, or maybe an entire team. How do you handle that? Not just technically, but like, how do you fix it with your coworkers?
Well, if we do this chronologically, we mentioned things we fixed on our own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, actually, my last one I didn't fix on my own. You had to do the backup, the restore. I'm sorry, you had to give me that data, right? So I worked on that. So we worked on that. So yeah, so that fits in. I think the first step is if you need other people to be informed, whether or not they're to help or they should just be informed, and you need to do that as early as is reasonable, right? That's one of the first things you should do. I know I would rather know there's a situation, even if I can't do anything about it, than not know and then be surprised later, right? So I think that's one of the first things. And then, honestly, if your coworkers don't handle it well, you know, being told if well, how do I phrase this? If it's better for you to fix the problem on your own because of what you'll have to deal with if you tell them, you might have a toxic workplace, right?
Yeah.
Most professionals, I've been lucky. Most professionals I've worked for or with in both IT and a lot of other positions that I've worked with, when a mistake is made, they almost unilaterally handle it as a professional and said, "We need to rectify the situation." Some of those places I did get taken to task afterwards. Right? It's everything's fine, cool. Hey, okay, we're good to go. Anthony, you need to go get a drink, you need to get some air or something. Be in my office, and then I got laid into afterwards. Right?
Yeah.
That's still immensely better. Like, well, dude, what were we thinking? That's still immensely better than like, hey, we have a problem, and then you're getting
Yeah.
seriously laid into right during it. So, yeah, first and foremost, you've got to communicate with people. Um, then once you work with your coworkers to get the problem solved, and then more to what maybe was your point afterwards, like what do you do to right things with them? I mean, hopefully you have emotional, like the emotional. You said work capital. That work capital, right? You've worked with them enough that they know mistakes
Yeah.
you've made. But I think postmortems help with that. Like, okay, this is what I did. I acknowledge what I did wrong, I don't want to word it that way. I don't like that. The mistake I made. It was a mistake. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it was a wrong call, but like you made a mistake. Here's what I did. Here's what I could not to do it. Or you can ask, what could I do not to do this because this sucked.
Right. Right. The postmortem, yeah, can be super helpful when it's approached correctly, which means we're not going to blame whoever made the mistake. What we want to understand is how did we get to the place where the mistake was made, and then how did we handle it after the mistake was made. Um, so you could have had a company situation where something strange happened that put you in a situation you weren't prepared for. There have been numerous, I will say, weird things, unexpected things that have happened across my IT career, and um, some of those things you prepare for, and some you don't, and you get something dropped in your lap, and you kind of look around, and it's just you and whatever happened. Somebody's got to do something, you know.
Yeah,
So that in itself can be a helpful thing to talk about in a postmortem. Well, how did this one person end up with the responsibility for this? Why wasn't
it's true.
you know why wasn't there anybody else available? In in situation, somebody might ask, well, Anthony, were there other people? That wouldn't be applicable to this, but let's just say that it is. Maybe a question is asked, well, Anthony, were there other people available? Did you try to contact other people about the problem before you did X, whatever X was? Um, and you might say, yeah, I did. I reached out on Teams or Slack or whatever your company uses these days to talk to people. Or maybe you're in an office. I stood up and yelled across the room, and no one stood up. So I assume no one was in the office with me at the moment. Um, Meaning I realized I had to do it myself. You know, or maybe I don't know, maybe there's a everything's on fire number at your work. And, well, if you have one of those numbers, did you call it, Anthony? Yes, I called it. Did someone answer? No. Or yes, but uh, the connection was bad and I lost the person and couldn't get them back or whatever. I don't know. So I think all of those kinds of things could be good and important to kind of explore because there could be serious breakdowns that would lead to putting a person in a situation that they're not really trained for, they're not really ready. And that should certainly, I think, color or affect how your peers and your boss and your boss's boss think about you as a professional. Um,
Yeah, you know what? And you said, I want to focus on what you said. Like, people might end up in situations that they're not ready for. They're too green or inexperienced or whatever. And I kind of want to flip that on its side. Sometimes that happens, and what I really think we need to do is make sure that, as a culture, is to make sure that if, Sally Sue or Jimmy John is trying to fix something and you've given them the responsibility to fix something or do something, that when they make a mistake, so now I'm on the other side. Now I'm talking like someone else made a mistake. Um, to say like, we put you in charge of this. It's not a fault of yours that you've been here for 6 weeks, 6 months, or 1 year. You know,
mhm.
depends on the scenario, right? There's some positions that you really need many a years to be the proprietor of, right? Um, and like, you need there is a responsibility on the culture of the team or company or whatever, that if we're to someone, they need to do X and then get mad at them when they make a mistake, we got to question ourselves, right? You know, if was this too much responsibility for someone we just trained up recently, or hey, it's a senior position, but we took a chance on a junior. Well, we took a chance on the junior,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We said, oh, let's do it, and we should be surprised that they made that mistake. That, by the way, is one of the key tenets. Sorry, I'm just my words, of becoming a senior, is honestly making enough mistakes that you've learned from them. I
sure.
question whether you're really a senior if you haven't either witnessed or created yourself some mistakes. Um,
Yeah,
I know plenty of things that I've done that, like, may have been traumatic, but they were traumatic enough that I will not do those again, both in work and in, you know real life. Hey, don't pet that snake. Um, so yeah,
don't
like,
take a picture of a snake. There's a
yeah.
story for you. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, you need to make mistakes, probably, tongue in cheek a little bit, but there's a series of mistakes you're going to make as you grow, and that makes you a senior. And if you have an employee, junior employee on your team, um, you need to be aware of that, or you need to not hire junior employees, right?
Yeah, for sure. The business takes on a certain amount of risk, no matter who they hire. But
Yeah,
definitely, like in the situation you're talking about, where maybe they've posted for a senior DBA in that position, or a senior whatever, senior software engineer, senior data engineer, senior accountant, whatever we want to say, and
can I
that
get that
job
one?
posting has been open, and they're like, it's been 6 months. By this point, if we just hired the first few candidates that we had, they'd have 6 months of experience behind them, and we could have gotten some stuff done.
Yeah,
So how about we take a look at those candidates again, and bring some of them in? So you do that, and you say, this is the best, you know Jim Bob, or Susie Q, whoever. We pick person X. They're not a senior accountant, but we need someone with accounting skills to step in and start doing the job, because the backlog isn't getting any smaller. And so when you do that, like you're saying, that the company definitely assumes more risk, I think,
yeah,
because they're bringing someone in that wasn't their ideal candidate, but they realized they need someone.
yeah. I mean, not even that. I mean, I agree with all that, but sometimes you're hiring a junior because you're hiring a junior, right?
Yeah,
Um, I'd make some change the topic of the show, but I'd make arguments that, like, it's a good idea for teams to always have a junior on the team. It's healthy growth, right? Like, we're not talking about a SEAL team here, that we need people to learn. Anyway,
yeah,
but not to
yeah,
go off on that tangent. Yeah, I mostly meant the fact that if you have somebody, especially if they're junior, and they make a mistake, you need to look at it in that light. You know,
right. Yeah,
even though the topic was really like if you make a mistake, but I just felt like we kind of got on this tangent where, like, the culture has to be healthy. Like, Oh, my job's broken. Oh, I made a mistake. I didn't realize this logic. Like, well, that makes sense. You've learned now. Great. Not, oh my gosh, now we're starting over. How dare you? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard a story about taking pictures of snakes.
Yeah. So this is years ago. We
There you
were
were 3,000 years ago.
not quite that many years ago. Um, Anthony's making fun of my age. Okay, moving on. Um,
We're going for a meme, but anyway.
okay. So we were. This is at my old house. We went out to the backyard and playing around, and I don't remember who, but someone noticed a snake that was like perched on the metal pole. You know, the pole that goes through the chain link. So the snake is just sitting on it, and we must have had. No, it wasn't a flash camera. It's been the phone. Um, Somebody in the family brought out their phone to take a picture of the snake. I don't know why we wanted a picture of the snake, but we did. Someone did.
It
But
was
they
cool
had,
looking.
yeah, I guess they had the flash on the camera. And when they took the picture and the flash went off, the snake was not happy about that and like struck out at the person. Now,
Oh
luckily,
no.
that person was like 15 or 20 feet away. So they weren't in any real danger, but it was kind of like a, oh my gosh. So that was definitely a mistake. Not the kind we've been talking about, but it was a mistake.
Yeah.
So
And they learned from it.
yes,
They
we
learned to always
learned
be 20 feet away and then take a picture of a snake.
exactly. That's what we learned. No flash. So,
Do we have any other bullet points? I know we mentioned, we never mentioned like trying to understand your emotions in those situations. We talk about communicating. I think I rambled a bit about like when a mistake happens, who do you need to read in, and then afterwards, once it's a cool down period, you might have to do postmortem.
yeah, I mean, I think that's about it in terms of this topic. I think it's good to talk about because it's universal. Everybody's going to make mistakes of various kinds, and yeah, you need a plan.
Sometimes it's an app, sometimes it's a database, sometimes it's a multi-million-dollar robotic press break.
Yeah,
That sounds like a big deal, man.
yeah, it did sound like a big deal. Um, but I mean, the person took care of it. They made the call they needed to make. I'm sure it was probably stressful, just like some mistakes I've made. I go to tell someone, I'm like, this isn't good. I don't want to tell them this. I I
Yeah.
did a thing that was bad uh, at
I know
work.
a second. I know a secondhand story where someone said they made a mistake and it basically took a week to fix in a production environment. I promise this wasn't me, but it was in a production environment, and the company had to keep running, but there was manual processes to keep the company running for a week as things got fixed. And they admitted that like the initial shock phase when it happened, they literally debated whether or not they should just if it was better just to walk out and be like, I've done a bad thing. I'm sorry. Bye. Um, Good thing they didn't, but I don't
Yeah,
recommend that. I professionally fix the problem and then be like, I'm too embarrassed to stay. But actually, don't be too embarrassed to stay. We all make this point, like for sure.
yeah,
Novus says it was not a good day. There was emphasis on his emphasis. It was not a good day. The problem did have a solution, and things worked themselves out. It would have gone a lot worse if I didn't call when it happened. 100%. That's I think a big takeaway. Like communicate what you need to communicate. If you make a mistake and you need someone to help you pull out of that mistake, reach out. Like you should. Environment should have a support structure for that kind of thing, right? There should people you could at least bare minimum rubber ducky with, right? I hope that one day we all work in environments that are healthy like that. Um, I've definitely been. I can think of one situation where I was alone and a bad thing happened, and there was literally no one to reach out to. Um, can't remember the number now. I was over a. It's like a dashboard. As a call, so you've worked at a call center, so it was like a call center app that was
Mhm.
supposed to make the people on the phone's lives easier because they had to look up a lot of information, tons of information, and
Okay.
it was great. It got put all the main information in front of them. It was smart about what part of the call they're on. They're like, you probably need this stuff, and they can do a little bit of clicking and get stuff a lot easier than going to multiple systems. Tie everything together. But it went down one day, and because of the decisions this company made, there was only one person in the company who understand how it worked.
Oh
There's
man.
only one person in the company who could possibly pretend to know what was going on. And unfortunately for me, that was me. So I'm sitting there like, I really wish I could ask myself for help. And I remember being stuck so many times. And to paint a picture, just to remind myself of the misery. So I wasn't quite in the center, but I don't know like when you say call center, what do you picture? Because I worked at a different place. So like what
Mhm.
I picture my call center was lots and lots of cubicles in four directions. It was mostly long though,
Mhm.
like a rectangle, and everywhere I looked was people, and I was nearest the middle, so I was surrounded by all these people, and all of them were people that either could not work right now because of me. Oh my gosh, flashbacks. Some of them were sitting around talking, blah, 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 and some of them were kind of looking, and their
Yeah.
managers who were like, who the do I need to yell at to get this thing fixed? Which is not the right response, by the way. That
Right.
is inappropriate.
Yeah.
Um,
That will not help your employees get it fixed faster.
no, it will not, and so on and so forth. So there's like this giant room full of I know there was 5,000 people, but not in that room. In my area, there's less than that, and they're all just stuck. And I'm like, what was I thinking?
Wow.
But it got fixed. It came up, and then I started seeing people start sitting down, and I started feeling better. But yeah,
That's a lot of pressure for sure.
yeah. If you have people to reach out to people. And if you're in
Right.
situations where you absolutely don't, maybe rethink things.
Right. No, I think that's a pretty good summary. What you shared earlier. I normally we like try to raid someone. I have no idea how to do that with from StreamYard to some other streamer at this point. So we'll just have to wrap it up and just like end the broadcast, and go from there. But
Everybody go watch somebody for 5 minutes and tell them when we sent you. That'll
there
work.
you go. There you go.
All right. Everybody
Yeah.
have a good night. We're glad you guys joined.
Yep.
Hopefully next week we'll be back to a readily broadcasted show with all of our fixins and the right branding, and we'll have a great
Yes.
back. I
That
noticed
sounds good.
Dunst didn't talk at all, so
Eh,
uh,
maybe next week.
maybe next week.
All right, everyone. We'll talk to you
Booker's
later. Thanks
welcome.
for dropping
Just
by.
kidding. Just joking. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.